right, we're here with Chris Chung on the Gravity Podcast. Chris, thanks for taking some time. I know it's super late there, but I'm happy that we could make this work.
No, super excited to be on here. Thank you so much for having me. You were fantastic on my podcast, so this is the least that I could do.
Well, it was fun. So, let's start at the beginning. Tell me about what it was like in your earliest memories of being a kid, your family, kind of, where you're from. Let me hear kind of the early backstory.
Yeah, so I was born in LA, but then I grew up in Hong Kong. So but half of my family is still in the stateside. So like we were just chatting before, I spend half of the time here, half the time there, just because my grandparents are there, but half of my family is here. So grew up here, grew up in a very, very nice family, had everything that I ever wanted, everything that I ever needed, and had the luxury in order to experience a lot of different things that not a lot of people are able to experience even throughout their lifetime. So I'm very, very blessed and very, very grateful in that sense. So I studied all of my primary school, middle school, high school in Hong Kong. And then by the time that I was 18, I went to Australia for university. And during that year, essentially, was when my parents got divorced. But it wasn't.
Let me just hop in before you go too far down the road. So let's back up a little bit. I'm always kind of struck by this, and having recorded, a bunch of these episodes and hearing, over, 100 life stories and journeys and the many that, you learn about that aren't recorded. There's always, this, it seems like there's, one of two paths that most people grew up in. One is,
right.
Somewhat traumatic or could be very traumatic. And then the other is this kind of unconditionally loving, like, everything was great. I have what I need. I'm kind of curious, when one of those pops up and, at least it sounds like, to me that you had this really, great family.
Right.
Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on, what that was like or how that, kind of started to serve you even, at an early age. And I'm also kind of curious, like,
right.
Tell me more about like what you were like or what you were into, in those early years.
Good question. I grew up because of having everything I needed. I grew up a very confident kid, was never academic ever till university, past that, never excelled academic, but I was always good with the presentations, the talking in front of class. And it's like trying to get a group of people. I would always find the people that were like, you guys do the work, I'll do the presenting. So if you guys don't worry about, like, if they're not good at speaking, they're just good at making the decks and all this stuff. I was like, no worries. Just give it to me. I'll make sure we'll be able to present it. So I've always been that kind of guy. Played a lot of sports. Basketball was the main thing. But being in an environment where I had everything that I ever wanted or needed kind of really set me up to have all these experiences that at that young age, I wasn't aware that, not everyone was the same way. And obviously Hong Kong, the cost of living in Hong Kong is very, very high already, but there's two different types of school. There's like essentially the local schools and the international schools. And I was fortunate enough to attend an international school. And that's where you learn, where we're able to practice, English, where Cantonese, Chinese, usually the dominant language, but we got to do that throughout my, since I was born until all my high school life. So it allowed me a lot of different experiences of traveling around the world, seeing different experiences, how different cultures work. That was something that set me up for a lot of the things that I know now and experience now. But I didn't know, if not having that experience then would be totally different compared to the way that I see it now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is, something that I've kind of wondered about, and confidence does seem to be kind of the thing that maybe you would get if you had, kind of everything you needed, you'd feel good about yourself, and then you'd be confident about who you were in the world. It's not always true, but not surprised to hear, you say that. And I also, I'm kind of curious about the academic piece. What was it like to not excel in academics, and did your family care, and were you confident with that you were good at other things, that you had this gift of being able to speak and present, and kind of tell me, like, for you as like a experiential thing, was that just who you were and it felt good and you're okay with it, or was there any rub there?
So it felt good. My parents were, unlike the traditional kind of Asian parents, were very much more supportive to do what I wanted to do, and you just focus on doing that. And if you like it, if you're good at it, then do it. But obviously, you need to. The way that my parents taught me was like, if you start something, you need to finish it. So growing up, I started a whole bunch of stuff. So I because of one concert I went to, which was a famous violin group where there was four girls, and this group was called Bond. It was one concert, and I was like, I want to play the violin. So if you're like, okay, if you start it, you got to finish it. So I did that, and I went from day one. I didn't like it day two, but I did completed all of my eighth grade violin. I started playing the drums. They were like, if you do it, you got to do eighth grade. I was like, fine. I did it. Did eighth grade. Taekwondo, I started it. They were like, if you do Taekwondo, you got to get a black belt. Did that, got a black belt. Horse riding. And then I started my parents were super supportive. So I would have all these different hobbies. When I was younger, I liked card magic, or close-up magic. So they would hire a one-on-one tutor, which was probably around $100 or $150 an hour, to come to my place just to teach me little tricks every once a week. And so I would pursue that. I pursued shooting, like as in, obviously it's not legal to shoot guns in Hong Kong, but the same kind of structure and format where they treat it as a live firearm, to do that as a course, swimming. So I did a whole bunch of different stuff, but whatever they told me that I needed to do, I needed to finish. My dad was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman, and he was successful at it. And that's what I kind of saw growing up. I was like, oh, dad doesn't work for anybody else. Unlike my friends, a lot of my friends, their parents actually worked. My dad was like, kind of, he can go to the clubhouse after he drops me off at school and then go to work, or after work, he can pick me up and then we can go grab a bite. He doesn't have to work on that specific schedule. And that really shifted my perspective. So since that, I'm probably like 12, 13, 14, I was really already saying, hey, I want to do business. I want to work for myself. I don't want to work for anybody else. I don't know how. I don't know why, but that's just what I wanted to do. And that's part of the reason of why, looking back now in hindsight, is why I didn't excel academically, because something that just didn't make sense to me. I didn't think it was worth it. I never understood why I'm learning this in math, or these different chemistry. I was like, I'm never going to use this. Why am I paying attention? So obviously in the moment, you still get a lot of shit from your parents and saying like, hey, you got to do better. So, but I always scraped by. So I would aim for, like, if 51 was passing, that's what I'm getting. I'm not 52. I don't care. So that was kind of how I viewed it. I don't know why I had that thought of saying, hey, school isn't important, because everyone else is going to go to college and everyone's going to get into good school. But I was just saying, hey, let me just wing it, and then we'll see what it do. I always kind of figured out, I was always kind of like the more so of the street smart kid instead of the book smart kid. So I've always figured out a way in order to make things work at the end of the day. So I kind of have confidence in myself, like, it's going to work somehow. I don't know how, but I'll make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. I love this idea about learning, that, you didn't feel chemistry was something you're ever going to need. So, get by, pass. Right. But it's very clear with all of the different things that you chose to get into, that you were very capable and very, excellent at learning. Learn the violin, right? Learn how to get a black belt, learn how to shoot a firearm, learn, you know how to learn things that you want to learn. And it sounds like a lot of them at a very high level. And I don't know, I kind of like that idea of learning that, why wouldn't we just learn things that we do want to use, or that we think we might want to use, or
Right.
that we like, that we're passionate about, it sounds like that's what you were learning, kind of instinctually, like that was just your way, or maybe your parents were supportive. It sounds like your dad was role modeling, what it would look like to be an entrepreneur and kind of do your own thing. Um, it's
It
pretty
was
cool.
it was definitely good. And I think one thing that really taught me was when I was around 14 until 18, I played for the school basketball team. And basketball was essentially the reason of why I went to school.
Mm,
Like there was nothing about, I would never do my homework, but I would arrive at school to train before the principals arrived at school. I would be at the school. School starts at like, I think 8:15. I would wake up at 5:30 or 6 in order to get to school at 7 and then start training for an hour before everyone even wakes or gets through the door, and then change and then start going to class. After school, I'd hit the gym before, everybody else, or even say after we do it. And all the time that people are spent studying and doing homework, I do an hour of workout in the gym, and then an hour on the courts in order to practice. And then the Sundays and training. So that really was why I enjoyed it. But that really set the tone for me on what on the practical aspect of what it takes in order to get better. I was never the best on my team, but the work that I put in allowed me to start from, a person that never get any sort of minutes to a person that was starting, or at least at the very, very minimum, the first one off the bench. Seeing that and living that and being at a school like this, you get to travel around to different parts of China in order to play with the other schools internationally, and this, that, and other was an eye opener, and definitely the experience that I needed in order to really grow.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing the importance of hard work, right? And your parents are also,
Right.
telling you got to finish what you start. I mean,
Exactly.
these are good lessons to really learn. And if you're learning them in things that you're excited by, then you can kind of carry that into your adult life and into your career. I mean, you can work hard and love what you do, and know that there's a way by doing that, you can produce great results. It's
Right.
pretty awesome to be learning that, at a young age. So, yeah, tell me, so you go off to college and university, and um, how's life start to unfold from there?
It's funny. So I barely scraped by high school, and I didn't tell anybody. Well, a lot of people, all my friends obviously know, like Chris is the guy that like likes to talk, that likes to play basketball, but never excelled academically. So I barely scraped by graduating. And then I got into university in Australia. And so I went to Melbourne in order to study in Melbourne University. It was, I did the first year. And within the first 6 months, I got a phone call out in the blue saying that, from my mom saying that, like, shit hits the fan. Uh, Mom and dad are done. Um, and we're like completely broke. Went from
Mm,
like everything to we're downsizing. Like we're getting rid of everything in your room. Like you're never coming back to this house. Like we're done.
mm,
And you're not seeing dad. Like that's it. I had a couple phone calls with dad, a couple phone calls with mom, and obviously both sides were saying different things. Everyone
mhm,
was crying. Everyone was doing this, that, and other. And I was like, I went to Australia alone. Like I was pretty independent in the sense of like, it's okay. You guys don't have to take me there to help me settle down. I'll figure everything out. Just
mhm,
let me be. Did that, went over there. So in a matter of probably 4 months of time, everything was like gone. No money, no home. Dad's then suddenly moved to back to Canada, and then mom stayed in Hong Kong, found another apartment, but essentially we're completely broke.
mhm.
Um,
What happened, if you don't mind me asking? I mean, what actually happened, or what do you think happened? Yeah, how much
um,
can you share?
yeah. So I before I went to Australia, I felt like I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Um, never could never really pinpointed it, but I never put too much of an too much thought to it, just because everything is, for the past 18 years, everything's gone okay. So I'm sure if it's not right now, it's going to be okay then. So that was kind of the thoughts. Long story short, there was a lot of lies that were just being told, but dad exited the business for the past 2 years before I was 18. So probably around 16, 17-ish, he exited, and we're just living off of that. And my dad is significantly older than my mom. Mm-hmm. And so that was happening. We didn't know what was going on. And essentially the way that I found out was dad usually wires me money every single month and say, hey, this is what you do. One month that wire came in and it was half of what I needed. And I was like, Dad, did you make a mistake? He was like, no, something's just going on. So just stay put. And then the other half is going to come. That other half never came. But what was tough was because I asked dad, I was like, hey, I just signed a lease here for a year. Can I do that? And he was like, yeah, that's okay. But not having money, I'm not going to be able to pay the lease. I was just a student. I wasn't working or anything. So that was essentially what happened. Mom and dad then instantly split ways. And it's really, really odd because I came from a super loving family. So mom and dad was always perfect. Never a single fight. Dad was the most loving person. Super. And everyone that knows my parents, or actually our family friends, would say that this is the last thing they ever expected. So it was completely out of the blue. It wasn't something that we were like foreshadowing. It was like, maybe we should have a backup plan or this and other. It was just something that just happened. And so that kind of fight or flight response kicked in, and it was like, either pick yourself up or do something or roll over and die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, no, I mean, if it's totally out of nowhere and just, not expected at all, I mean, that can certainly, really rock your world, especially at that time in life. I mean, as a college kid, I mean, I've got two of my own kids in college, and I know kind of where they are in life. And, to have your life turned upside down like that is pretty rattling. You described kind of the, the options then, fight or flight. So, tell me a little bit about then what for you? I mean, kind of what kicks in and how do you start to move forward?
Right. So when that happened, I had another probably 4 months before I was due to go back to Hong Kong and finish that. My first year, essentially. What I then, before everything hit the fan, I also got accepted. My girlfriend, we were still together. We dated right after high school, went to same high school. She went to the London in the UK in order to study university, and I went to Australia. So before then, I liked Australia, but I didn't love it. So she was like, why don't you come over? So in December, before everything happened, I applied and actually got unconditional acceptance offers from a few different universities. So they were like, hey, you can, if you just take it, you can come and you can go to school here. I was like, oh, fantastic. So that was the plan, in order to go to the UK, in order to then do my second and third year to graduate my university there. When things went south, I instantly said, hey, this isn't going to work. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to complete university at all, because where's the money going to come from in order to fund this? What I then did was actually, it instantly kicked in, where it was like, what do we do in order to make money? Now, during that year was the first year that essentially where there was content creators on Instagram. And it was not a thing at all. No one knew what the hell it was. Instagram was kind of brand new at the time. And so I was checking things out and seeing what were people doing in order to make money. So I saw that people that were creating content consistently would be able to work with brands, and brands would pay them in order to do something big. And that was just what I figured out. And I was like, oh, let me try to do the same thing, because I was fortunate enough to have a lot of these assets already. And so by what I did was I essentially reverse engineered what people were doing. So people that were getting most paid was like either like people that are creating fashion content or people that were creating lifestyle content. That was kind of the people that were getting the bigger brand deals. So I was like, oh, fortunately, I either already have these sort of content, or I have access to these sorts of content because of the way that I've grown up. So maybe I can start doing this stuff. So I just doubled down on doing that and started producing content over the next probably 6 months. And if you fast forward a little bit, I came back to Hong Kong, downsized everything. And obviously mom was upset. And we were in this place, but my grandparents and everyone was able to help and say, hey, Chris, you should still go to college. So they were able to chip in and say, hey, still do that, still go to London. So I was very, very grateful in that sense as well. And then I pursued that, and I was able to start producing and working as a content creator on Instagram over probably the next 2 years. And I was able to figure it out, what was all the big players doing. And I reversed it and started growing a following, and went from 0 to 5,000, 5,000, 10,000, 10,000, 15 and 20. And then from the content that I was creating, the fashion lifestyle content, it was exactly like how I expected it to be. People reached out, and I started working with very, very big brands and doing different partnerships and being with dinners with will.i.am, being in the front row on fashion weeks, and being able to travel to Milan, go to the London Fashion Week, and do all these different things to get paid in order to make things work.
Yeah. Incredible. Really. I mean, I'm kind of curious, when you start to discover this, content creation,
Right.
Instagram and, early days, what was you described kind of seeing other people doing it and kind of reverse engineering and figuring out how to, do it yourself.
Right.
But what was like, was there a certain energy or excitement or fear around kind of like the newness of it all? Like, this isn't like you're like, oh, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to go start this business and do this thing.
Right.
It's like an entirely new thing. And so what was it like for you to kind of, step into something that, was really new for everybody?
Right. So before obviously Instagram, the YouTube thing was already growing. So there was a lot of existing YouTubers. I know YouTubers get paid because of the YouTube platform, the way that ads work on YouTube. People watch it, you get paid. So the first thing that came to mind was maybe I should be a YouTuber, because that was like proof of concept. It was there. I recorded I bought a whole bunch of little gears, a few lights here and there, a nice camera that I borrowed, and a nice mic. I set everything up, start recording it. It just didn't feel right. And I wasn't naturally good at that. And it was just too much. I didn't like the editing. I didn't like the planning of the videos. It was a little bit too much. Whereas Instagram, to create the perfect picture wasn't that difficult, because I figured out that like the perfect picture is, it's almost also, it's the elements that needs to be aligned, the elements that's within the shot, what you're wearing, where you are, what you're holding, and then the way that it's edited. And then each picture, as long as the color tone is somewhat similar to the rest of it, that's why people like their grids perfect. It looks curated, it looks nice. It came way more natural and way more easier for me to manage. So that's what I instantly then gravitate towards, knowing that because of the YouTube way that works, it would the same way would apply for Instagram creators if they're good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And tell me about the fashion piece. I mean, is that something that you're just at this time, interested in, or there was certain kind of, I don't know, sexiness to it to be able to, be on the runways and I mean, I don't know, it sounds kind of fun, but I'm just curious, like where that part of you, kind of how you shifted into that part of the influencer world.
So I think there's a two-part, right? If I told you that I didn't like looking like cool and being on the red carpets and doing, sitting front row, it's like that'd be a lie. I loved every minute of that, but the fact that I was able to get, see, the thing was, like, I rang my mom that one day when I got that deal in order to have dinner with will.i.am and to take a couple pictures with a pair of Specsavers was the brand that I was working with, to take a couple pictures of will.i.am's collaborations with Specsavers. They gave me a whole bunch of like tailored glasses and say, hey, Chris, we want you to have dinner, come out at this very, very nice restaurant. It was just going to be like 6 of you guys or 8 of you guys. Everyone's going to chit chat. And then you're going to take a couple pictures, post it, and we're going to pay you X amount of dollars, was something that I just rang mom, was like, Mom, this is it. Like this, like it, this is it. You get paid a significant amount to have dinner with the celebrity where you can chit chat and you get to look good. And they have photographers in order to make sure that you look good. It just made sense to me. Mm-hmm. So the coolness definitely played in part, because obviously then when you start doing that, and at first it's kind of dumb because no one pays attention, and then everyone's just kind of commenting and laughing. But then once you start getting a little bit of traction, they're seeing that, oh, this is a little different. Oh, I didn't know you were able to get in here. Then that's when like your friends start messaging you saying, how are you able to do that? Can I do this? Can you bring me along? Can I be your plus one for, the X show, or can we go to that show together? Do you have, so it just works off of that. And then once you get one brand, then all the other brands start, because you're working with Specsavers. Oh, we're, Adidas, we want to work with you, or we're Boohoo Man, like whatever, like they want to work together because it's just by association. So that kind of snowballed.
Okay. So tell me, where does it go from there? I mean, obviously the kind of influencer world continues to expand and change, kind of tell me, you're getting a lot of traction, building your following, what happens next?
So I did that, continuously doing that. Whilst I was doing that, obviously, because these are always one-off jobs, right? You get paid for one event or one specific post, or an X amount of posts. So I wanted to make sure that when I'm not doing that and I'm not going to school, I want to be doing something else. I got to do something else in order to get paid more. So I figured out that it was kind of new as well. There was a lot of people that were doing this drop shipping model on online, setting up a store, running some ads, and then getting purchases. So I set up the same, and had a decent amount of success at it right off the bat. But what I learned was I liked the model, but I didn't think it was sustainable long term, just because it's everyone's going to start doing it, and you don't actually own anything. You're just running ads essentially to a nice website. You don't do any fulfillment. You don't do any sort of things. But what I did like was the skill in order to be able to make the ads work. So that marketing aspect was something that I really enjoyed. So by building a couple stores that did well and practicing that marketing, the Facebook and Instagram ads, then got me into this hole of cracking what do people that are, not only spending, a couple $100 or a couple thousand a month in order to for Facebook, Instagram ads doing, but what are the people that are spending, a couple 100,000, a couple million a month doing, that's like completely different to what I'm doing. And that's the hole that I then went in whenever I wasn't doing any sort of campaigns or when I was not going to school.
So you started kind of marketing for just larger brands or individuals, people that were just spending a lot of money. I mean, tell me a little bit more about exactly what that looked like.
So I was only applying what I was learning to the stores that I was running myself. I wasn't doing this for anybody else. Mm-hmm. I was doing the content creation for myself, running ads to my own store, and then kind of learning and growing at the same time, and then doing the Instagram campaigns whenever that was going on. As I was progressing, I would every Christmas or summer, I would come back to Hong Kong, and I started getting all these questions because people were starting to notice that this Instagram thing that I was doing was working. And so they would ask me, Hong Kong is somewhat slower. They don't get like when influencers was a thing, or in the UK and in the States, Hong Kong was barely able to catch up. They're always kind of 1, 2, 3 years behind on this cultural catch up back then. So no one knew, there wasn't a term called influencers in Hong Kong. And actually in Hong Kong, what they call it is KOLs. So KOL stands for key opinion leaders. And this is the term, like if you say influencer, like half of them would get it, but the other half, everyone gets KOL, like Chinese people or English people, KOL. Okay, you're one of those guys. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these, because of the family friends that we had, everyone was asking, is like, Chris, how did you build, 10,000, 15,000 followers in your account, or 20,000? How did you do this job? Can you do the same for us? So that's when I put two and two together and say, hey, whilst I'm back here for summer, maybe I can do this. So that's when I actually started my company, which is the company that I own now, which is located 852, and say, hey, I'll do content production and management for you guys strictly for Instagram. And there was maybe there was like a handful of people that actually did this back then, because no one even barely used Instagram. So we were saying, hey, let me do this. So we were able to do it for one of the largest chain, which is a hair salon, a high-end hair salon and a nail treatment group in Hong Kong, and then celebrity chefs in Hong Kong, and then celebrities in Hong Kong. And we started managing all their different accounts in order to do that, whilst I was still kind of flying back and forth for school. So I never really told people my age, just because they think that I was flying back and forth, but they were like, if you're just a kid that's still going to school, like, why would I trust you with anything? But I was able to grab a couple of my buddies, started this company, and just say, hey, we'll just take it a step at a time. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but people seem to want to pay. We can deliver this, and I guess we'll just take it a step at a time and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and obviously you are really onto something. I mean, there's still a huge demand for people wanting to, build their platforms, their audiences. Instagram, continues to be incredibly popular place to do that. And you stumbled into something. I mean, maybe it's not by accident. Maybe this is part of your skill set to kind of be able to see these things.
Right.
But no question, it turns out to be a pretty great skill set to have, and a pretty impressive niche to be in. So I mean, maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you are doing today.
So doing that, after pursuing that for probably a year and a half, 2 years, what I found was, whenever we tried to increase our prices past an X amount, it just didn't make sense and people want to leave, because the thing that I soon understood was, if they didn't know how to build the audience and the brand themselves, they wouldn't know how to monetize it at the same time, because they didn't do it at first. So at some point, as I increase my prices, it just gets ridiculous, because they see their followers growing up, but it doesn't equate to any sort of monetary return for them. So why the hell am I going to pay you this much in order to do this? Because it just kind of looks good. So I didn't like that. And it was hard to get them to know what they're doing in order to be able to transact that into dollars and have partnerships and then work with other influencers. It was just too much in order to do. So what I then switched, because I was still practicing all the marketing stuff on the Facebook and Instagram ads ourselves and honing that skills over time, I said, hey, let's actually switch from the content management production side and then go full on Facebook and Instagram ads only. And I know there was a whole bunch of different agencies that does everything. You want to do Google ads, come to me. You want to do YouTube, I got you. You got email, I got you too. Content production, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, we'll do everything. But I didn't want to battle with that market. I just wanted to be really good at one specific thing. So I got really good at Facebook and Instagram ads. And that is all we ever offered. And that's all we did going forward. So I started working, doing a lot of working with more clients, stateside, bigger name, bigger brands, and bigger individuals in order to help scale their Facebook ads. And that's essentially what we've been doing now. And that's what we're still currently doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, why not? I mean, it certainly looks like those two are here to stay, but I am kind of curious about, where you think things are headed. There's a lot of conversation about Web3 and, kind of how that's changing the dynamic, NFTs and VR. And so I'm just kind of curious, if you see anything coming down, the the pipeline here that might be shifting your business or shifting how people that are, out there trying to brand themselves or their companies, how you are seeing things change?
I feel like the way that advertising is going is there's a lot of people now that is focused because of how accessible it is. A lot of people put focus on like the latest, what is the latest hack, or there's this new trick that instantly just you plug in and then the system instantly works. And when you spend, millions of dollars on Facebook and Instagram, you soon figure out that those tricks and tips just it never lasts. It never works. It might work for like one or two instances, but it never works long periods of time. So I feel like there's a lot of people entering this industry and there's a lot of people entering this market. But if they're focusing on that, that's what's going to make them fail. The thing that I think is most important, like when people work with us, they were like, Chris, what makes you better? It's like, I don't know. All we focus on is executing the very, very fundamentals at scale and at a high level. That's essentially all we do. There's nothing fancy to what we do. Nothing. It's not like some cool system that we built out that we just instantly plug into yours and then it just works magic. It's just the fundamentals at a high level that we do, and we execute that on a regular basis. And we have enough experience over time that allows us to adapt quicker. I think building a brand going forward is super important, as it has been over the past 5, 10, 15 years already, but is only going to be more important. So I think having a brand on different social platforms is the way forward. But at the same time, just because of how important data is, capturing the data at the same time whilst you build your brand is the key. Like you can't just rely on, having, even if you're like, Kylie Jenner and you have hundreds of millions of followers on Instagram, what if like Instagram just goes away tomorrow, but you don't have any sort of way in order to communicate with these people? So I think having your own data whilst building it is the play that everyone should be focusing on and everyone should be doing in order to grow that. And something that, I was talking to Dave Meltzer, or a mutual friend, and I was asking him something about, I was like, Dave, you take a very, very interesting approach in building your brand. So we run all of Dave's Facebook and Instagram ads. But one thing that I noticed that he does that the majority of the other people don't do is he never sells online. Ever. You don't see him say like, hey, buy my X do or join my coaching for Y. He never does that. So I asked him this question. I was like, Dave, why do you not do that? And what with the level of access that you have and the people that you surround yourself with, what do you see? Why do you choose that? And he was telling me, he was like, it's way more powerful to do it that way. And he was like, Chris, if you start focusing on building a community and you do this consistently over the next 20 years, you'll still be younger than I am. So if you just do that and you don't need the money right now, you just focus on doing that. And when you should sell, when people come reach out to you from the content that you provide, the help that you're able to provide, then you can say, hey, we can do this on a monthly basis or a 6 months basis, whatever that commitment is. But you'll be in a much further ahead than everyone else that's trying to milk every single dollar out of every single person that comes into their ecosystem.
Yeah. I'm kind of intrigued by this. I actually am sitting here thinking about it, for myself too. And, with the podcast, we've wanted to grow the audience, and, I want to grow the audience because I get good feedback. People seem to get something out of it. They like hearing stories. It's inspiring. It's helpful, whatever. And so I'm like, well, I want to share that with more people. And there's no monetary goal in doing this work. It's strictly about the enjoyment of being with somebody and hopefully, hearing a story that matters to me and to other people. And I've kind of been told over and over again, well, you just have to kind of stick with it, and more content. Dave actually always is telling me more content, and there's a limit to the amount of, content that I want to put out. But I guess what I'm kind of curious about is, the just how much of all of this is really misunderstood or unknown still. In other words, for I think conventional wisdom or traditional thought, I should say, probably still looks at influencers as um, gimmicky, or they don't honor them. They're not saying like, wow, even today, like, most people probably understand that the Kardashians are brilliant, or that they're, incredibly successful, or at
Right.
least people know how wealthy they are. But I still think there's some sort of like general sentiment that they're less than like other billionaires who have built businesses, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And it's there still seems to be some misunderstanding or disconnect in this world where people don't really get what's happening, right? And what's happening is pretty brilliant marketing and very strategic.
Mm-hmm.
It's very it works. It's working maybe more so than anything's ever worked, you know. And so I'm kind of still kind of, and the idea of like personal platforms, like that's another thing people like don't really understand it. I'm not even sure I understand it in the potential of what it will eventually do. So, kind of coming back to Dave's statement about the 20 years, that's kind of where I'm still at. Like I'm not selling anything. I don't have a mastermind. I'm not sponsoring anybody, or
Right.
pushing ads on my podcast. But I believe there's also something 20 years from now that if you do want to turn it on, you have that ability. And so that's part of what I'm doing and what I think maybe we all should be doing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on just kind of the current climate around this thing that's still new, and new things generally, tend to disrupt or upset, the old system. And it just feels like that's what's happening. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, and also kind of how you see it evolving.
So I think like everything, there's always a new platform, right? So everyone, there's Clubhouse, and then there was Instagram, there's Facebook, and then people feel like those are only for the older people now. And then now there's Twitter, and there's TikTok, and then people thought that TikTok's only for girls that are doing these little dance mix-ups, but they don't understand that that could be used as a business tool as well, just because of how powerful the organic reach is. I feel like the cycle of a lot of the different applications we see is always at the beginning is crazy organic reach. And then as you move towards it's pay to play, whereas like you post one Instagram post now, it's like there's only 10 people that ever actually see it. And then there's only 10 likes. And if you want a lot of people to see it, you got to pay in order for them to do it, just because they've amassed all these different users and they have the upper hand now. Which is why I feel like it's something that Dave does extremely well, being capitalizing on every single platform. He's on every single thing, and somehow he has the time in order to create content for every single way, and it's repurposed, and he's live, and then he's not live. But building that community is, I think, the strongest way where you actually have real influence. I feel like it's better to do it one person at a time and actually amass real influence, because you're able to help these people. And then obviously at the same time, like I was previously saying, you definitely want to have some sort of database and capture it by yourself, where you actually own that sort of data so you can communicate with these people. And that's why people have text platforms, besides of not only email, they want to do text as well. But doing that over time, building a strong community, building a bigger brand, and always staying on top of like the bigger platforms that come out every single year, when they do have organic reach, in order for you to capitalize on that as well, is going to really set apart people that are in the game for long term. At the same time, for the people that are just only in it to sell you something quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I just think the world just continues to change in this particular piece of it. How we live and how we share how we live, and how we consume and how we decide what we're going to consume. I mean, it's just changing drastically, and it still feels early, for people
It
like
does.
you that are, kind of in this space and has been for a while. It's just super. And I guess maybe this is, my last question for you, but I'm just curious, like, how do you stay on top of the changes? Like Clubhouse, you mentioned, came in pretty hot and was like, everybody's in Clubhouse. And I actually kind of fell for it. I felt like, oh, this is like redefining podcasting. Like this is like live podcast, but you don't actually have to record, and the whole thing. I'm like, but then it faded off.
Right.
TikTok seemed kind of gimmicky and was like, just dancing, and now it's like, really carved its own thing. Twitter was
Right.
kind of down, and now it's so. How do you kind of stay with it, or how do you choose where to pivot and what's real, and what you really need to invest in? I've heard Gary Vee talk about the percentages of things that he'll I think it's like he goes 80% on one thing and then takes the other 20 and dabbles. How do
Right.
you do it?
I feel like if you know about it, you should do it. And I feel like the way that I personally do it is because I'm surrounded by a lot of people that are doing this sort of thing of content creation and being a public figure at a very, very high level. So I have more visibility over what they're currently doing and what's working and what's not working. But I personally kind of apply I'd rather be consistent on the different platforms and do less of what everyone else is doing, but consistent than not do anything at all. So some people that I work with, or the bigger profiles, they're able to put out, one podcast episode per day, and or two different, like they bunch up a whole bunch and they just release it like 7 episodes a week. I don't have the scale to do that, nor do I have the capacity to currently do that yet. So I stick with 1 episode per week that we release, but I rather do that consistently every single time. And then we can start adding different elements towards it. With the TikTok stuff, we want to do, if we bunch up all these videos, can we release 1 video per day, and then we make it native to that specific platform? I think the native to that platform is very, very important. I hate it when people going back to an ad thing. It's like when they put an in-feed ad where it's square on a story placement where it's supposed to be long. It almost screams like I'm about to sell you something. So just look at this, where it's not native. Everything should be native. But I take the consistency approach across the different platforms on what's currently working, what people are doing, and then try to grow that as time goes by. I've never been good at capitalizing on like the newest thing. It's like the thing that like, it's like pre-Clubhouse, or like when it was like the first 100 people, first 1,000 people. I never caught that wave, but when people are on it and starting to do it early, I try to get on that and do it as much as I can.
Got it. Yeah, it's fascinating, Chris. Thanks for your time. I could talk to you about this stuff all day. It's pretty interesting, and can kind of get into the weeds. But I love what you're doing, and it's great to have a chance to hear your story and how you arrived here, and give you a chance, for any final thoughts.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Brett. I think everyone that's executing any sort of content and trying to build a brand should just focus on consistency, and the consistency of the reps of getting the reps in of one more, in order to do one more piece of content, one more piece of platform, building one more person within your community in order to expand the brand. I feel like this is the way that everyone's going to win in the future. And if you're able to have that consistency over time, that's the way it's going to win. And I think you're doing an extremely well job. Obviously, your podcast's absolutely crushing it. It's an absolute honor to be on, and thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We'll definitely stay in touch, and love to do some work with you. And thanks for taking the time and staying up late and sharing your story. I really enjoyed it.
Of course, brother. Anything that I can do to help you, I'm always a phone call away.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, man.